Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with the midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you're ready. And we're just going to start with this update from some of the members of the Conference Committee for the America Competes Act. And while this process can take up a few months, likely will drag on through summer, I wanted to provide a few updates just to highlight that we're getting closer to some sort of tipping point to get Safe Pass than we ever have before, and obviously getting quotes from members of the conference committee like this is better than none. So I wanted to share this one from Rep. Blumenauer, so thank you, Tom Engel, who is a member of the America Competes Conference Committee, and so he's actively engaging in the negotiations for the final bill and trying to keep safe in it, said he is optimistic that the large-scale bill will be the vehicle to finally enact cannabis banking protections. And so we do like to hear that, while it's worth keeping in mind that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is the one that makes the call and not Blumenauer. But if we are seeing many more senators step up and share their support, then reason to believe that Blumenauer might be accurate in his statement here. And so obviously we're going to have to wait and see. And so with that, I just wanted to share this from Emily Wilkins, who is reporting on Congress and campaigns for BGov. Now, I don't follow her. I've never really seen any of her tweets before, but I wanted to share this because she provides, and a quote from Steny Hoyer, who has a leadership position in the U.S. House, from my understanding. Hoyer lays out an optimistic timeline on Competes and USICA. So when can we see this conference committee finally coming to an end and finalizing a completed bill with potentially the Safe Banking Act? It could be end of May, finding an essence of an agreement moving forward so they could, get a finalized bill, and by the end of June have the bill passed, hopefully sent to the president's desk and signed into law. And so just wanted to share this potential timeline. Now again, take this with a grain of salt, but end of June we could see the bill finally passing. I figure a rough timeline is better than no timeline whatsoever, and if there is any truth to this, that gives us self-direct investors about 6 more weeks to accumulate some of the fastest growing real US companies in the largest emerging market in the US at these dirt cheap valuations. And so on to this one from Tom Engel, wanted to share is apparently the Biden Justice Department is urging the Supreme Court to reject a case on medical cannabis and workers' compensation. And so I really hope the Supreme Court does take this case, because obviously when useful idiots are in charge, nothing gets done. And they claim, saying that cannabis policy is evolving and that Congress and the executive branch are best suited to handle federal-state conflict. Well, you've had 15 months to do something and you've done nothing. So I don't think anyone believes you at this point. And if you reread this, do you think that the Biden Justice Department is urging the Supreme Court to reject the case? Or is it big pharmaceutical companies on behalf of the Biden Justice Department urging the Supreme Court to reject the case? So I really hope the Supreme Court takes this, because obviously it seems the Supreme Court realizes that criminalization of drugs is very much unconstitutional, and while they're waiting on Congress to act, it'd be great if the Supreme Court took the ball into their own hands and did that. Especially as the pressure continues to build and the Biden administration has handed so many of these easy home run victories on a silver platter. As another example from Todd sharing that Congressman urges Transportation Department to reform cannabis testing policies for drivers. And so this is in reference to the fact that many truck drivers across the country, even in legal states, still are getting fired or can't work because they're testing positive for using cannabis, for example, on their vacation or on their days off, which makes no sense. And so again, big ups to Rep. Blumenauer for stepping up, because he's the congressman referenced in this article. But obviously, yes, this crisis must be treated with urgency. And if you just deschedule cannabis, it takes it from an illegal substance to a legal substance, and then all of these issues go away. And you don't have problems with truck drivers not being able to continue or to keep the supply chain moving. And again, so many domestic issues solved just by descheduling it. For some reason, the Biden administration wants to do everything except these simple solutions that they have presented. We do see another sales record set, this time out of Arizona. So thank you, Marijuana Moment, for reporting, as Arizona recreational cannabis sales hit a new record in March state reports. And so in March, medical cannabis sales dipped below 50 million for the first time since recreational sales began in January 2021, registering just 49.4 million. But we've seen this trend before, as when medical patients don't have to go through their doctor to get what they need, and they know the type of flower that they want, they can go straight to the dispensary and sort of cut out that middleman. And so that is why we do see that. But to add that, recreational sales have rebounded after a small lull in January 2022, going up at least 2 million per month in February and March. And so from my understanding, the revised total for all cannabis sales in February was 123.8 million, which is actually more than the total in March, which made up 121.8 million. However, from my understanding, the adult use sales in February was 71 million, with a little bit more in medical sales, but then the reduced medical sales made up for an increase, and this is the record for adult use sales in March, 72.3 million alone. And so while total March sales did not beat February, I think it's still strong, and obviously good to see adult use sales surpassing the previous month. And so if you wanted to see a breakdown of all the taxes and all the benefits that ending cannabis prohibition has brought to Arizona, you can pause to read. Otherwise, you can grab the link below to get more info. And so just wanted to share this one from Barrons, as it does highlight TerrAscend's most recent earnings. And the title, TerrAscend grew its cannabis sales last quarter as rivals didn't. And while I don't have a subscription to this article, I did just want to share this because I would assume that some of the growth that TerrAscend did end up seeing was because of that Harvest acquisition, and because Harvest had a solid footprint in Arizona, and Arizona has just legalized adult use. And so while other states did not see as much growth, that is why I think TerrAscend likely did, and so that does make that Harvest acquisition a very good and timely one for them. And so just wanted to share a snippet from this, because the first time I clicked on this, I was able to read the whole thing. And so if you did want to read the whole thing, you can most likely grab the link below and get one free read. But just to add at the bottom, as Stifel analyst Andrew Parthenio reiterated his buy rating on the stock in a Thursday note after TerrAscend's report. The company is bucking the trend of flat sales at other cannabis companies, said Parthenio. Yet it has been trading at a 5.5 times estimated 2023 EBITDA, compared with an average of 8.5 times at other multi-state operators. And so just to highlight again, at current valuations, it seems like TerrAscend is seeing more growth than the other MSOs, yet they are trading at a 5.5 times estimated 2023 EBITDA, compared to an average of 8.5 times. So just wanted to share that from this article, but again, you can grab the link below if you did want to read the whole thing. Well, this is another one from Cantech letter, so just wanted to share it if you did, or if you were interested and wanted to read the link below. TerrAscend Cannabis has a 221% upside, according to Haywood. So do take what Haywood says with a grain of salt. However, if you did want to read a little bit more into why they believe that, you can pause to read, and there is more to this article. You can grab the link below if you're interested. Otherwise, just wanted to share it if you were interested in potentially investing in TerrAscend or you wanted more information. So to keep this trend going though, Sayshu Metacharla did share his Q1 2022 earnings takeaway, this time for TerrAscend. And so while I've shared this in the past, I did also want to share it as he does a bit more of a deep dive than I did in my past video. And so if you wanted to read his take on TerrAscend, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can pause to read his points. And then scroll down a little bit more context. You can pause to read 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you can pause to read 9, 10, and to the end there. So just wanted to add this for some context if you wanted to get a bit more information. And as well, this one comes from Cannavestments, likely the strongest showing of the Q1 earnings season from TerrAscend, posting a beat on both revenue and EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And gross margins returned to impressive levels, and cash flow turned back positive as TerrAscend continued to execute in Florida and gained wholesale share in Pennsylvania. And so while I think it's going to be quite small, not too bad. So you can pause to read the whole thing. Otherwise, you can grab the link below if you wanted to see Cannavestments, their take on TerrAscend's most recent earnings as well. And so with that, I got this one from the American Bankers Association titled 4 Ways Cannabis Banking Could Cross the Finish Line in 2022. And so while it's nice to see the American Bankers Association turn up the volume and continue to show their support, because obviously SAFE is sound policy, and while it would not only help the banks, it would save many American lives, especially those in the industry. It would allow them to open bank accounts, and the only obstacle in the way is Chuck Schumer, whose actions have shown that he's working for big pharmaceutical companies that pay him to delay any cannabis legislation, and not the American people that voted for him and who were fooled by his campaign promises. But nonetheless, just wanted to share what they believe are the 4 possibilities. And so while this is certainly the lowest chance out of them all, the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act, I suppose it is possible for the Dems to pull off the filibuster somehow, which would allow them to pass something with 50 votes from my understanding. And that could be the wild card that would get this done, but I don't believe that's the case. And obviously this will not get any votes in the Senate if held for vote, and is most likely dead on arrival. And so this is most likely the lowest percentage possibility, but wanted to share that so you can pause to read the rest of the information on here. Well, if we scroll down, obviously where we see the conference process taking place right now is the U.S.-China competition bill. So this is most likely the highest chance we have for getting it passed this year, and this is where we sit right now, so you can pause to read for more information on that. Well, if we scroll down, the full year 2023 National Defense Authorization Act. And so this would be like a repeat from last year in December, trying to get SAFE snuck into the final version of this. While we did see Chuck Schumer pull SAFE out last year, which again only affected the minority entrepreneurs and small business owners, this could be, the end of the year possibility for getting SAFE through. And then so lastly, just to share, SAFE plus legislation, and then being the final wildcard option. And so this is the idea that if SAFE could not pass in one of the larger scale bills that they can add it into, then from now until November, if nothing gets done, done, which based on the Dems' track record is not unlikely, Schumer would be wise to hold a vote for the Safe Banking Act on the Senate floor, which if he held the vote for the Safe Banking Act on the Senate floor today, it would pass because the bill is bipartisan and it has enough support in order to get the votes. However, for Schumer to appease his Dem voters, he could potentially hold a vote on the Safe Banking Act and tie that in with the HOPE Act and some other sort of clemency that, releases some of the nonviolent drug offenders. And so if you wanted to read about this option, you can pause to read. So those are the four main options that the American Bankers Association highlights. But again, it does just make me optimistic that we are getting to a tipping point, especially as they keep writing about this and we see more and more options come into play and more support for this to get passed. And so I wanted to share some snippets from investment firms. This one from Todd Harrison sharing, so thank you, Todd, or this one from Roth on U.S. cannabis. So thank you, Todd, for sharing. The odds of Safe Banking Act are growing. And so that is nice to hear as a weekly rehash bipartisan push for safe garnering momentum. And just to add and share this last sentence, as a growing number of lawmakers are beginning to understand this, demonstrated by new bipartisan support, we believe the odds of safe passing are growing with more influential legislators and government officials supporting incremental cannabis reform. And while again, the ball is in Chuck Schumer's court, the more support and influential legislators and government officials supporting obviously does increase our odds. So you can pause to read the whole thing if you'd like. Well, we've got this one from Shooter McGinley on U.S. Cannabis, so thank you, Todd, for sharing. So just a few quotes. Equity performance, valuation disconnected from fundamentals, excuse me, and prospects for strong multi-year growth. That is very promising. While expect the first quarter of 2022 to be potentially a bottom for 2022 sales, as we also expect fundamentals to stabilize in the second quarter of 2022, which could form a bottom for the equities. And so this is a snippet from Needham from May 16th, so fairly up to date, and so you can pause to read for a bit more information as they look at the first quarter 2022 preview and outlook for upcoming MSO earnings, Verano, Cresco, and Air Wellness, which will come out in the coming weeks. So there's that one you can pause to read. You can pause to read this one as well. And then so lastly, we've got Wells Fargo on the new California news and U.S. cannabis. So thank you, Todd, for sharing this. As we don't typically get Wells Fargo's 2 cents on cannabis, but nonetheless, they do see the California removing cannabis cultivation taxes as a welcoming windfall in the state and likely for the industry. And while they do not focus on any of the U.S. MSOs or plant-touching companies, they highlight Hydrofarm and Grow Generation. I don't know who SMG is offhand. Oh, Scott's Miracle Grow. That just triggered a bell in my head. But so nonetheless, pure plays for the ancillary companies that provide the materials for the cultivators and the growers. They focus on Hydrofarm, Grow Generation, and Scott's Miracle Grow. And so that is one way that you can play this. Obviously, you can also play with the U.S. MSOs, which is higher risk, higher reward. But nonetheless, good to see Wells Fargo sharing their 2 cents on cannabis. And so I wanted to share Columbia Care as they report their first quarter 2022 results. And so while you can read this just to get the major highlights, I wanted to walk you through the main things that I'm looking for. As I do own shares in Cresco Labs, and Cresco has that pending deal with Columbia Care, I'm quite happy with these earnings despite, the circumstances with Q4, Q1, Croptober, the lack of growth in New Jersey and other states not coming online. I thought this was a pretty good earnings, and I wanted to show you at least what caught my eye going through it. And so while you can pause to read the main snippets, and while it's not ideal to see a negative 11.6% quarter-over-quarter decline, we do have to factor in everything that I just mentioned previously, especially the delay of launch from New Jersey, because had they launched 6 months ago or 9 months ago, Columbia Care and all the other MSOs in that state would have likely seen more quarter-over-quarter growth. But I think it's worth showing you that while they saw that decline, their gross profit only declined by negative 1.1%. Because when we look at Q4 2021, when they brought in $139.2 million, they managed to keep a gross profit of $57.2 million. While this time around, revenue in Q1 2022 down from Q4 to $123 million, but they kept relatively the same gross profit of $56.6 million, which means they're getting their cost of goods sold down, which I think is very good to see. And so with that, comparing year over year, up 43%, which is great. But if we look at the gross profit, up 68.3% year over year, I think that's very significant. And so they've been able to increase their adjusted gross margins up to 46%, which is an improvement from last quarter of 44.5%. And so again, while this is ugly to look at, I don't think it's what we should focus on, as the year over year numbers are very impressive as they continue to optimize and likely try and cut costs in order to allow the acquisition to go through. And so that's the main thing I wanted to share out of this at least. And so if we look through their top 5 markets by revenue in Q1, obviously it's a painful state to be in right now, but when all the growing pains are done, you're going to be happy that you have, an early and large footprint in California. And so obviously, despite the struggles there, it's still the number 1 revenue driver for them. Number 2 being Colorado, number 3 Massachusetts, number 4 Pennsylvania, number 5 Virginia. Well, we've got the top 5 markets by adjusted EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization in Q1, Colorado, Maryland, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And so If you wanted to read a bit about their operational highlights for the first quarter of 2021, building scale with continued retail expansion, proven cultivation expertise and execution, my apologies there, and sustained momentum on branding initiatives at retail and product level. So you can pause to read all the bullet points there if you'd like. Mind you, wanted to focus on this as they still provide their 2022 outlook. Revenue, they're anticipating US GAAP guidance of $625 million to $675 million with an adjusted EBITDA of $120 million to $135. And so nonetheless, they still look like they are on pace to have a very strong year as things will likely improve from Q2 and into Q3 going forward. And so lastly, just wanted to highlight what I mentioned earlier, but if we look from March 31st, 2021, their cost of goods was $52 million or $52.3 million, while in this most recent quarter, their cost of goods did go up to $66.4 million. However, when your cost of goods goes up by about $14 million in order to bring in roughly $37 million more in revenue, I think they're heading in the right direction. So very happy to see that. And again, that allowed them to keep much more gross profit than they would have last year, up to $56.6 million from $33.6 million. And after all said and done, they still managed less of a net loss this quarter in Q1 of 2022, a net loss of negative $27.9 million, which is actually an improvement from the net loss they had last quarter at this time, which was a negative $29.1 million. And so lastly, just to scroll down to their balance sheet, taking a look at their cash position as of right now, they have $168.4 million in cash with total current assets of $323 million. Well, if we look at their total current liabilities, $222 million. And so while they don't have enough cash to just completely pay off their total current liabilities, they do have far more in current assets than current liabilities, which tells me Columbia Care should be good to continue to execute as they have been over the next 12 months going forward. And I have no doubt that in Q2 and Q3, we'll see the revenues rebound for them. But from now until the time that the deal is expected to close with Cresco Labs, I imagine they're trying to focus on cutting costs and optimizing their business so that deal can go through smoothly. And we've got another big MSO to compete with the other big boys. And so all in all, I'm very happy with these earnings. We zoom out, focus on the year-over-year growth as opposed to the quarter-over-quarter growth and how they've been able to optimize their margins and maintain larger gross profits despite the lack of revenue growth. And so on to some other MSO news. As Verano launches mobile applications and exclusive rewards programs for flagship ZenLeaf and Move cannabis dispensaries. As their applications and their respective rewards programs offer a superior shopping experience according to Verano, plus greater convenience and broader accessibility for patients and adult use customers across 71 dispensaries in Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, New Jersey, with additional stores and states to follow in the near future. As these applications offer exclusive promotions, deals, news, and product information, pickup and delivery ordering, and additional features. And so you can get a list of the comprehensive reward programs that include, and pause to read the following here. But nonetheless, it seems Verano is the first of the tier ones to go with this mobile application route to try and get their customer base within this ecosystem to offer them exclusive deals. So we'll see how this plays out over time. While TerrAscend announces that they launched their first ever concentrates in New Jersey. So great to see new products coming online already, as liquid live resin, vape cartridges, and live resin crumble now available exclusively at New Jersey Apothecarium dispensaries. And they add that the concentrate category accounts for up to 20% of cannabis sales in other states. And we are proud to be the first company to bring these products to New Jersey consumers, says Jason Wild, executive chairman of TerrAscend. In just 3 weeks since commencement of adult use sales in New Jersey, cannabis connoisseurs are realizing that our Apothecarium dispensaries are the place to go for the high quality and high potency products they seek. And furthermore, we can't wait to expand this category, which they plan to do by launching additional kind tree concentrates, including butter, batter, diamonds, and shatter in the coming weeks. So clearly they're taking advantage of the opportunity to be one of the first movers in this market. And just to add, the first 300 customers at each location, and to celebrate the launch of these new products, the first 300 customers at each location will receive prepaid coupons, which can be used at local businesses in the surrounding areas. So try and say that these MSOs are not giving back to the communities that they are investing in. Well, we've got this news from Puff Daddy, as congrats to TerrAscend apparently for entering their 12th state in Ohio, as they've been awarded dispensary license in Columbus. Expect to see TerrAscend move on Harvest Ohio assets within the year. And so for more information from the pictures, you can get that if you'd like. So more information on that, and apparently TerrAscend being awarded one of the licenses. Well, if you did want to get the original source, I believe it is down here. So link below if you wanted to check that out. Well, we've got some other state news, as the Miami Herald has reported that Miami drops years of opposition to medical cannabis dispensaries inside city limits. Which is great news for any cannabis business in the state of Florida, as after years of stonewalling, Miami on Thursday paved the way for the first medical cannabis dispensary to open in the city. It was a major policy shift for a city that has spent years insisting that dispensaries were illegal, even though Florida legalized medical cannabis in 2016. And the 3-2 vote just got over the line by the city commission effectively ended Miami's full rejection of medical cannabis dispensaries, allowing the business that had been pressing the issue to get permits to open a dispensary. And so they don't specify exactly which company wants to open the dispensary at this location, but it says that they will now be allowed to partner with a licensed dispensary company to open the store. And so this begs the question that the action may lead to others applying to do the same. And so while we see this precedent set, let's look out over time to see if any other MSOs do start to apply to open dispensaries in Miami to take advantage of the high volume and the big spending I imagine that goes on there. Well, on to this one from Tom Engel. Wanted to share that new poll finds that cannabis legalization is more popular with Texas voters than the governor, Greg Abbott, the lieutenant governor, Dan Patrick, President Biden, VP Harris, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator John Cornyn, the NRA, Mexican border wall, and local police. And so for the love of God, let's hope that cannabis prohibition can end sooner than later for the voters in Texas who clearly want it. Well, on to this one, just wanted to share from Todd Harrison. So thanks, Todd, for sharing. As Iowa launches campaign to reform state cannabis laws. And while we've seen Iowa very much against this in the past, it is good to see that they're changing their views and they see the benefits of reforming. As a campaign has begun to show legislators there is broad support for Iowa to join many other states in reforming cannabis laws. And so they're likely just talking about medical cannabis to begin with, but nonetheless, good to see these efforts start in states where we haven't seen it before, while apparently Arkansans petitioning for cannabis legalization ahead of elections. And so just to share this, as again, this is early on, but ahead of the upcoming election, Arkansans, people from Arkansas are signing petitions in their push for legal cannabis, which needs more than 89,000 signatures to qualify for ballots. And so while they have from now until November to collect those signatures, good luck to those in Arkansas, and hopefully you can reach this in order to get the question on the ballot to hopefully first legalize medical cannabis and then continue along that trend and eventually legalize recreational cannabis. And so on to some studies. Wanted to share MedRiv, XIV, but just wanted to share this as I thought it was very interesting. Substance abuse and the risk of severe COVID-19. Mendelian randomization confirms the causal role of opioids. So hear that, causal role of opioids, but hints a negative causal effect for cannabinoids. Love to hear that. And so this is fairly new though, as well, as of May 6th. So you can pause to read the whole abstract, but mainly to highlight that their Mendelian randomization analysis confirms the causal relationship between addiction and severe COVID-19 illness, but hints at a negative causal effect for cannabinoids, which is reason enough to deschedule so we can further research. And given that a great deal of COVID-19 mortality is attributed to disturbed immune regulation, and so from my understanding, this is COVID causing inflammation, and then your body's immune system actually is the one that starts to freak out and then cause your body to go into hyperdrive, and then causes the inflammation to get worse and worse. The possible modulatory impact of cannabinoids in alleviating cytokine storms, potentially reducing the inflammation and providing balance in your body. That's obviously just a simple simplification, but merits further investigation. As I've said before and said again, let's just deschedule cannabis so we can find out how good of a medicine this plant actually is. But some more studies. Wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison. Gateway, as another review concluded that CBD might offer promising therapeutic potential for the treatment of substance use disorders, especially for nicotine, cannabis, and opioid use disorders based on available human studies. So all the data points to cannabis being an exit drug and not the gateway drug that prohibitionists falsely claimed for years, that has sadly soaked itself into the public subconscious, that we need to work hard to get it out of. But lastly, wanted to share this one. As a nug a day keeps COVID away? What? A study suggests that active cannabis users hospitalized with COVID-19 had better clinical outcomes compared with non-users, including decreased need for ICU admissions or mechanical ventilation. So this sort of builds off of this study in a little bit of a way, but at the same time, just to add what this one had to say. Now, this is the print version of it. Cannabis consumption is associated with lower COVID-19 severity among hospitalized patients. And why this isn't getting pushed through the news, I don't know, but it ought to be. And so the result of 1,831 patients admitted with COVID-19, 69 patients reported active cannabis use, 4% of the overall cohort. Active users were younger, 44 years versus 62 years, less often diabetic, so healthier, and more frequently active tobacco smokers compared to non-users, which is kind of surprising. Well, notably, active users had lower levels of inflammatory markers upon admission than non-users, which is again counterintuitive but fascinating. And based on univariate analysis, cannabis users had significantly better outcomes compared to non-users, as reflected in lower NIH scores, 5.1 versus 6%, shorter hospitalizations, 4 days versus 6 days, lower ICU admission rates, 12% versus 31%, and less need for mechanical ventilation, 6% versus 17%. So using propensity matching, differences in overall survival were not statistically significant between cannabis users and non-users, non-users, but nevertheless, ICU admission was 12 percentage points lower and intubation rates were 6 percentage points lower in cannabis users after adjusting for covariates. And so conclusion, this retrospective cohort study suggests that active cannabis users hospitalized with COVID-19 had better clinical outcomes compared with non-users, including decreased need for ICU admissions or mechanical ventilation. And so that is obviously worth scheduling the plant for and removing the double standard and stigma so we can research more and to find out how effective this is as a medicine. However, because cannabis is still Schedule 1 substance, our results need to be interpreted with caution given the limitations of retrospective analysis, and prospective and observational studies will better help elucidate the effects of cannabis use in COVID-19 patients, and that'd be a lot easier if the damn Biden administration would keep their campaign promise, deschedule cannabis, and so we can finally research how effective this medicine really is. And so 2 more stories. Todd Harrison, thank you for sharing this. As the German Bundestag pressures health department for cannabis reform. And I'm just happy to report that we continue to see more press releases from Germany about, moving this ball forward, as apparently the German Parliamentary Budget Committee threatened the health ministry with fund reduction if they don't enact cannabis reform. And so obviously this means they're likely pushing to get this done sooner than later, which is great. And while we don't have a solid update, just happy to report this, as this is better than seeing no news whatsoever. And so lastly, wanted to share this one. We got a Fox Business News interview with Todd Harrison, nonetheless, one of the main references here. And so it features an expert reveals why weed stocks are fading. And so if anyone has any questions about short selling, I've covered that in previous videos. And while you can go to shortdata.ca to see the highest shorted companies on the Canadian Securities Exchange, which happen to be the MSOs, especially because naked shorting is legal in Canada, I don't have a great understanding of how this works in the US market with the over-the-counter market. And so for that reason, though, I wanted to share this because this does touch a little bit more on how, the shorting is happening in the US to manipulate these prices and drive them lower in order for, institutional investors and hedge funds to get in at low prices that they think that, or that they deem acceptable for themselves in order to, benefit buying low and eventually selling high in the future. And so I'll let this interview explain that for you.
When it comes to the stock market, the role of algorithms and some of these other factors that have nothing to do with fundamentals in many ways seem to be stacked against the retail investor.
Yeah, well, we think we're seeing that in droves here. We're focused on the U.S. cannabis space. They're forced to list up in Canada at the CSC where there is naked shorting, where it's legal, or evidently it's legal. You have the U.S. custodians from J.P. Morgan to Pershing to last week it was Vanguard pulling custodians so institutions can't get to it. So you have a 95% retail base right now, and 75% of the volume that we're seeing on most days of U.S. plant-touching securities are coming from the Algos. And for a long time, we saw it, but we didn't know what to make of it. We saw it, they were pernicious, they were out there every day, they were hitting the sector down.
But I would just say, considering how difficult the overall market, or how difficult of a time the overall market is going through right now, I feel like the MSOs, given the circumstances and the manipulation, are holding up fairly well. What about you? Let me know in the comments, but nonetheless, I'll let him continue.
Not the reason that they're down. Algos aren't the reason these things are down, but they certainly amplify trends. They certainly create dislocations, and we've seen a large quant fund. Finally, last week we had a conversation. We were told that there's a large quant fund that's out there, that's been out there, targeting retail pockets of the stock market through what's called a volatility factor trade. And they have it on in pretty significant size in U.S. cannabis, MSOs, and those names. They have it on evidently in XBI, which is biotech, and on the ARC names as well. And algos don't know math. They only know levels, and that's what we're seeing, I think.
It's fascinating to me, and you got to walk us through this a little bit more. So you're saying it's not necessarily pernicious, but if they're being programmed a certain way, because algos can only do what they're programmed to do, it seems like they're being deliberately programmed to create even more havoc and more destruction, particularly in names that might be vulnerable. To me, it looks like
Wall Street is
fearing these stocks to go lower, thinking that investors will blink and bail out, making their job even easier to make money on the short side.
Listen, as we're sitting here, we're looking at the fundamentals troughing in the first quarter. We're looking at New Jersey leading the tri-state, leading the East Coast online. We're very excited now. We look at these multiples back, through COVID lows, but the algos are out there every day. And when you don't have institutions to set and steady price levels, these things are going to keep going till the trend changes or some of the inputs change. We're working on this. We're looking at it. We see it. Now that we know where it's coming from a large multi-strat hedge fund. It's not just U.S. cannabis. There are other consumer-laden sectors that they seem to be targeting. But we're gonna follow the fundies. We like to say over time the market weighs and traders vote. We think that over time that the market will prove us right.
I got less than a minute to go. What role should the SEC be playing in all of this?
Right.
Great question. I think you got to look at some of these things. Like I said, there's nothing illegal about this. But certainly, are they manipulating prices? I think that you can make an argument that they are. It would be great if the SEC can get involved and look at some of these pernicious types of quant trading that's out there, but not holding our breath.
Yeah. I wish they would. You know what? I feel like, a lot of people came into the market with the best of intentions. They just want to make money. They want to be part of it. The greatest money-making machine in history. They use common sense. Legalization of marijuana seems like a smart investing thesis. You shouldn't have to be down on your money because of quants or anything else. Todd?
And while Payne does make some good points there, I think it's very much worth differentiating the difference between owning solid assets and just having their value go down over time. And even if it's gone down for 15 months straight, despite the fact that the underlying fundamentals of those companies have only improved, their revenues have grown, they've gotten bigger, and they've expanded their footprints, there's a big difference between that and then obviously buying a company that you don't know anything about and then selling for a loss 3 months in or 6 months in because you didn't know what you were investing in. And so I just hope that my channel has been able to provide some value. And while he does simplify the cannabis investing thesis, I hope that my videos have helped you connect the dots a little bit better and made you more confident investing in these solid companies that, again, are some of the fastest growing companies in the largest emerging market in the US. And so what do you think? Do you agree with Todd that there's some manipulation or not? Let me know in the comments why or why you don't think so. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of today's stories? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.